Hey everybody, I'm Dirty Dan and welcome back to Greasy Boy Customs. Today we're back on the Ranchero air conditioning. We're going to be talking about hoses and fittings and wiring. Let's get started. So this is what comes with the kit. You get your hoses, all of your O-rings, fittings, and you also have your instructions where they map it out here. Now if you'll notice, like let's look at these two fittings at the air compressor itself. You'll see numbers 10 and 11, and you go over here to 10 and 11, and they'll tell you that's a -8 and a 10, 135 degree, with the ports on there, which would be that one and that one. And those are the two that go on your AC compressor. They've done a pretty good job of all that, and they also supply you with bulkhead style fittings, which is really great too. So when you drill your hole that's in your firewall, you put it through there, secure it with that nut, and now you have a nice secured fitting that won't rub. Before we get too far with the lines, we do need to mount our dryer. Now, you want to make sure this is in a location where it's not going to be right on the exhaust manifold or in danger of being hit by the hood hinge. And honestly, you can fit it up here as well. That's just an aesthetic thing at that point because you may see it through the grill. And when you open the hood, you may see it, but you can easily mount it right here or back on the firewall. We're actually going to probably mount it right back here on the back side of this shock tower, so it's kind of out of the way. And we'll just have, you know, one line running to it and going in, and then another one going out and through the firewall. So let's go ahead and get this mounted. When you look at the top of it, see it says in? It even has a flow direction right there. Very important. Reference the instructions and make sure that you plumb it correctly. Now that we routed our first line and we've got it in place, we want to take a paint marker, or you can use a piece of tape, and you want to mark a line there just to make sure as you're crimping it, the orientation stays correct. This is our AC Crimper Tool. Now this one is made by Master Cool, and the part number is 71550. You don't have to get the Master Cool brand. There's a lot of different people that make this kit identical and they just rebrand it and put their name on it. It's fine. Open it up and show you what's in here. So this is what's included in the kit. You have your different dies, and you also have your device that you clamp into your vise, and this is how you actually clamp the lines down. It also does have holes machined in here to where you can bolt this down, but limited on space, we keep it to where we can remove it. So we're going to go ahead and select the right size dies, put our hose in here, and then we're going to tighten this down and crimp it up. Stick your line in, and you put your pin in, secure it in place, and this bolt is what compresses everything. Now you can do this with an impact. I'm just going to do it with a wrench, just so we can slowly show you how it goes. And you don't have to have power tools to do this. You can do it with just a socket or a regular wrench. But go until it's bottomed out, back it off a couple turns, screw it out by hand, pull your pin, and then you can flip it open, take your line out, and look at that. It's a beautiful crimp. It's tight. It's not going anywhere. And our marks stayed lined up nice, so everything should fit. And there's our first line. Crimped, run, secured, grommet, and run down to the bottom there. And then we'll go back and put another P-clamp here to secure this. Use these P-clamps. People call them different things. I call them P-clamps. They're insulated with rubber so they don't rub through. You don't want these lines chafing while they are thick. You want to make sure that they are not going to be against anything sharp and rub through. So let's make some more lines. Next up is our bulkhead fittings. Now, these got to be careful because not only do we need to make marks in the firewall, we also need to look on the inside of the firewall and make sure it's actually going to clear. And surprisingly, most classic cars, there's lots of room. This one, there's really not a lot of room under the dash and around the factory heater box, but we found a spot. Right here where the heater hoses are, there's a little indentation in the firewall, and that's where we're going to put them. They're going to be side by side right there. And we've already removed the glove box, so you can see the firewall in there as well. And right there above that orange wire and to the right of that yellow wire is where our lines are going to come out. So inside, you can see right there, look at that. There's our two lines. It's a perfect little spot for them to come through. And they're going to come down, and then they're going to go down here and right there. But we're going to keep them tucked up as nice as we can so they're out of the way. Go ahead and get those lines made up. Completely random. I almost forgot. We got to put that power steering pump pulley on. Way easier to do when you do it off the vehicle. And also my 1-inch ratcheting wrench is not here. There's another shop that I do side work for, and it's over there. So we'll be done in just a couple minutes. Cue the hyperlapse. Now that we have all of our lines run, we've got the power steering pulley on, all the bracketry's in place, the unit is bolted in place. The last hose that we need to run is the drain hose. Now this hose is also very important. Those of you driving around your modern vehicles, sometimes you hear something that kind of sounds like water sloshing around in your AC box under your dash. That's the water that's coming out of this drain tube. Some of you may have clogged drain tubes that you want to check. You see, they give you more than enough. They also give you a grommet to run it, as well as a T-fitting if needed. We're going to go ahead and figure out a good spot to put this, drill the hole. This is the part you need to be careful. Again, we're drilling holes. You can't just find a spot, drill the hole. You need to check on the other side and make sure it's not going to interfere with anything. And we want to be able to run this hose to where it's dripping out of the way and not on the exhaust or on the engine or transmission. We'll dive inside. I'll show you exactly where it's at and where we can possibly drill the hole. So here's your 2 lines on the back of the unit, and there's your drain tube right there. So, something you need to keep in mind. 1, the unit is pretty much level right now. You need to make sure that you have downward flow with this, otherwise the water will just sit. So unfortunately, the best place for us to do this is it's going to kind of be noticeable. We're going to run it as far up here as we can and drop it down, probably right in this area. So what we'll do is we'll measure and figure out where this point is and make sure that it's not going to interfere with anything under the car. All right. Both hoses, because there's a drain on each side on this unit. That's where the T-fitting comes in. Both are hooked up, running through the floor. We just got to go underneath and route that hose and trim off the excess. Well, looky there. By the way, we also got the right belt on there with plenty of adjustment. Look at that, tight right there, and we still have that much more room to adjust. In case you're wondering, this is the belt that I used. This 15525 should also be good for a Gates number. And you can pause the screen and your measurements are right there. Next up on the Ranchero adventure is wiring. Let me show you the instructions that come with it, and then we'll show you the wiring that you're going to be doing on the inside and the little bit of wiring you'll be doing on the outside. So there's a couple wiring diagrams you need to reference. First is the one that shows you the wiring coming off of your under the dash unit and explains where it all goes. But that's a 2-pin switch. We have a 4. Here is the diagram with your 4 and shows that's used in correlation with an electric fan, which we do not have, so we're just going to be leaving that wire off, and this is still going to be our switch to turn on our compressor clutch. However, you also go over to page 10 here. Woo, flip the page, there we go. And this shows you a bigger breakdown of everything and explains the relays that are already connected, where they go to, how they're hooked up. This is something good to keep in your files after the job is done. There's really not a whole lot of wiring. Again, these relays are already hooked up, so you really don't have to do anything with those except mount them in a convenient location where they're out of the way and you can still get to them. You do have 2 ground wires to connect, as well as your AC clutch signal, and then you have your ignition and battery power. And you'll notice on the battery power, it's already got a circuit breaker in place. So we're going to start off by running the ground wires and mounting these 2 relays, and I think we're going to mount them right there where you see that foil on the firewall. That's going to be out of the way from hitting it with your foot, but still accessible if you need to get to it. Talk about the wiring on our switch real quick. Now there are 4 wires in here. You have one of your blues to ground, one of the black and greens goes to your signal coming from your unit, and this one is going to go over to your clutch on your compressor. Now you have this one. This one is for an electric fan signal going to a fan relay, but this one does not have an electric fan, as you can see, so we don't need this. But what we are going to do is we did cut it, fold it over, and heat shrink it. We're still going to leave it here because if the customer decides to run an electric fan in the future, they're able to do so. Fully connected, everything is wired and secured. We're ready to start the next part, and that is charging. Now, there's a couple important things you need to know about charging a system. One is the correct oil amount in the system. That is very vital to the performance of the air conditioning. Under and overcharging the oil can damage internal components. Make sure you're using the right type of oil. There are several different types. The most common ones you can come across are PAG and ester oil. Make sure you're using the right one. Also, you need to pull a vacuum on this. Now, if you just charge your system without pulling a vacuum, it may work a little bit, but it's not going to perform well at all. We're pulling the vacuum down. You'll notice that when you get past 0, it reads an INHG, that is inches of mercury. Now, yours may not pull down to 30, and you'll have to understand that sea level can affect this as well. Anywhere between about 27, 28, and 30 is just fine. Now that we've pulled our vacuum for about 10 minutes, you can pull it for 5. I like pulling them for 10. That's just fine. You can pull it for longer if you want to. We've shut off our valves. We've shut off our vacuum pump. We're going to watch our gauges, especially this low side gauge, because that one is obviously where you're reading your vacuum at. In inches of mercury, we're going to pay attention to that, let it sit for 10 to 15 minutes and make sure it doesn't lose any vacuum. Can you let it sit longer? Absolutely. And we're going to, because it's lunchtime and I'm hungry. So we're going to let this sit, come back and get a reading when we come back, make sure we're good. And look at that, almost an hour later, still beautiful. Look here at the notes on your install. You'll see they give you the charge amount, 1.8 pounds, 1 pound, 12 ounces of R134A. And they also come down here to the oil. It says the sanding compressors, no additional oil is needed. It's already shipped with the proper charge. All other compressors, consult manufacturer. I completely forgot to mention, we did get the coil remounted right here. All right, look at that. We got the fan set on high right now. It's freezing in here. It's almost 100 degrees in the shop, and we're running about 50 degrees out of the vents. That is pretty well. The AC is running amazing. Like I said, it's almost 100 degrees in the shop today. The humidity is absolutely insane today, and we're still getting 50 to 55 degrees out of the vents, which honestly, a 40-degree temperature difference is pretty good. I'm not going to complain. So one thing we've done is we've shut it down. We've closed our valves. We're not drawing any more refrigerant. We want to watch our 2 gauges, and you want to let it sit for a little while. Eventually, the 2 gauges should have the same reading. This is called equalizing. You want to make sure your hose is equalized. Also, while it's running, you want to watch your gauges, make sure they're not bouncing or fluttering or doing anything like that. Everything looks great, so we're going to let it sit, make sure they equalize, and then we're going to fire it up and just double check everything, and we'll be good to go. Well, we just got back from our test drive, and boy, did it work great. It's 95 degrees outside today, and we actually got an even better temperature out of the vents while we were moving. That's because we had more airflow across the condenser as we were driving. Now that mechanical fan's pulling just fine, but going down the road, we were getting near 42 degrees out of the vents. It was actually starting to cause condensation on the vents, so you know it was working great. One thing we did forget to mention that we had to go back and alter was the drain lines. Now in this application, the area between the bottom of the dash and the top of the transmission tunnel was so small that there really wasn't any room to pick the unit up anymore. Now in an application like a older 50s or 60s car or a truck, you've got more room, and obviously you can pitch your unit back a little bit and you have room to run that drain line so that the drain lines are both falling. So we ended up running 2 drain lines instead of teeing them in. Works just fine. They're nice and concealed. It's working great. Overall, this kit was pretty nice. It was easy to install. Everything worked great on it, and I have no complaints. So, if you have any questions about anything we did, or if you're doing AC on a project of your own and you have some questions, feel free to hit me up. Until next time, happy hot rodding.